So hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this Friday live session with Shubham. Um, First of all, Shubham, I want to thank you for joining me today, and just to give you a brief introduction, this session is very different from our usual session today. This is what we call as a last mile push session. And I was having this conversation with Shubham, and it just felt to me this is a session which is a journey of A, setting high expectations for yourself, and B, not settling for a score which many would consider as a great score, but would Shubham, by his own standards, considered subpar. It's on paper this seems like a journey of going from a 700 to a 750 or a 720 to a 750, but in reality this is in a journey where you say, okay, how do you actually motivate yourself to get to that target score that you aim for, and how do you go about building the skills that you need to build to get to that target score. So Shubham, welcome first of all to this session, and I want to thank you for doing this session for us. And then let's start with a brief introduction to you, who you are, your background, where do you currently stay.
Thank you, Rajat, and hello, everyone. My name is Shubham, and I stay in Singapore. So I've been staying here for the past 13 years, and I've done my schooling as well as university over here. I graduated last year in chemical and biomolecular engineering from NUS, and I'm currently working at one of the oil and gas companies in their supply chain management program. So I decided to take GMAT right after I graduated because I was still in touch with academics, and I thought of getting that done so that I could focus on my overall profile in the coming years.
So you don't have plans to go for an MBA right away, but you said, hey, let's get this out of the way, and so let's start with why that 750 score.
Sorry, can you repeat
Why
that? Sorry.
why that 750 score? Why did you aim for that? Or
Of
what's
course, right. Because when I researched about the top universities in terms of MBA, I noticed that the average score, GMAT score in those universities is around 730, 720. And to even get a chance at a scholarship, especially coming from an overrepresented Indian engineer background, I thought the best chance would be to go aim at that 750 level or above. So that's why I wanted to have that target in mind starting off. So that's why I had aimed for a 750.
perfect? Sounds wonderful. And first of all, by the way, most of you should be able to hear us. Arushi, I think the sound problem is at most likely at your end, and my apologies if you're facing those issues. But other folks, if they can respond to this, that they can hear the sound, and that'd be wonderful. It'll tell us that there's no issue at all, right? Because I can hear Shubham perfectly, I think, and from his responses, he can hear me as well. Now, just from a format standpoint, I think we probably spend about 25 to 30 minutes on 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 just questions that we have today, and then from that point we'll take your questions, and so you can have your questions for Shubham about, hey, how did you go about preparing for the GMAT, as well as other questions. So Shubham, your goal is to go to a top B school. You looked at the scores, median scores that are there, and you want a scholarship. And you said 750 sounds right for a scholarship, which it does, by the way. And we have this wonderful portal called Admissions Scholarships that we released last a month and a half back, where we have some stats about scholarships and about 40 case studies of folks who've gotten scholarships. So 750 definitely is a really great target score for that. So let's start with your preparation. So you prepared for uh,
1 year.
about a year when you got to that 720 score, and so tell us about your preparation. Tell us about how you felt when you got to that 720 score.
Right. So I started preparing in August 2020, and I thought of just starting on my own. So I had got the usual OG bundle of 3 books and the Manhattan Guides to supplement that. So I began my studies with the Manhattan Guides, completed all of them, and then moved on to my OG bundle. But in the start, I did take one mock test, official mock test, to gauge where I am. So in that, I had scored a 650 with a Q47 V32. So I knew that Actually, both quant and verbal needed improvement, but verbal was lagging behind much more than quant. So I started solving official questions directly, thinking that that would somehow kind of increase my abilities in all the sections. So I started doing that, and until January, I was doing only OG questions. I had exhausted all the material, and then I started on with the advanced OG guide.
Hmm.
So this scenario kind of ended in February when I realized I had not booked a date for GMAT and I had been studying for too long already. So
So
I
it
went
was
ahead and
already
booked.
seven months by February if you started in August. Okay.
Yes, so I was aimlessly solving questions, thinking that it would all fall back in place when I take the actual
Hmm.
test. So I booked a date for 2nd of June for my first attempt, and my aim until then was to solve more of these questions. So I kept solving questions from different sources, from GMAT Club and from the other various guides. And until 5 days before the exam, I had not touched a GMAT official mock. And in
So
between, I
you
did
take
take.
Manhattan mocks though.
Yes, I did take 6 of the Manhattan mocks to
Hmm.
gauge where I am. So in those mocks, on an average, I was scoring 700. So I was thinking that there is this notion about Manhattan mocks that it's usually hard. So I thought maybe on the actual GMAT, I have a good chance of scoring that 750. And so this situation continued until early May, and then I started just preparing for my final month. Then during the last 5 days, I just decided to take an official mock exam, on which I scored a 750, and I was quite happy knowing that I have an exam in 5 days, so I'm
Hmm.
somewhere there. So in a greed, I can say I purchased the rest of the 5 mocks as well, and I gave them one after the other. So you can imagine by the test
Wow.
day, yeah, by
Yeah,
the
yeah.
test I was fully exhausted. So, and then you could see that in my scores as well. My first mock was 750, and after that it dipped down to 720, 710, 710. So just before the exam I had got a 710 as well, and my motivation had gone crashing down. So that's how I was preparing until my 720 attempt.
Okay. I think it's really important to set some context to who you are. So we talked about the fact that you live in Singapore, but you're also a very bright student who has various standards for himself. Um, and so you're also a very diligent student. I mean, this is something that, as you can see in the 10-month journey from August of 2020 to June, you put in a lot of effort. You'd gone through all the Manhattan books as well as gone through all the official material and about 12 mocks, right? If you think about it, 6 official as well as 6 Manhattan mocks or so. And so it's a lot of effort that went in there, and you got that 720 score. Now, how did that, so 720 good score, but how did that feel? And then what prompted you to buy the e-GMAT course post that? Because
Uh,
most people would really say 720 is a great score. Let me just practice more and maybe I'll get a 750.
Actually, during the 720 attempt itself, I realized when I was doing the verbal section that each of the question I was just trying to kind of go with what felt right. So I did not have any systematic approach for be it CR or SC or
But you've been
RC.
studying for 10 months though.
Yeah, without any approach in mind. I was just no, like I was just selecting answers with what felt right, and most of them used to be correct. Going by gut feeling used to work, but in that scenario, somehow happened that in verbal section, the questions which I was getting right earlier, I faltered on them, or they were from a basket of questions which I always had a weakness in. So that's when I realized that this is not going to work, because this approach of not having any systematic methodology would only bring my score down. So after that 720 attempt, I knew that it was not a true representation of my abilities. And although quant was okay, a Q49 was okay for me, the verbal was quite bad.
Yeah, well, it wasn't bad. It was still, but let's kind of go back to this one piece. You've been using the word the systematic methodology. The notion of systematic methodology. How did I mean that get in your head to begin with?
Actually, it was built in since school and even university, in
Mm,
which we usually have a procedure of solving problems, which somehow I did not get or feel during my earlier preparation during GMAT. So
mm,
usually in school and university, we are taught that okay, you're given this type of question, this is how you solve it step by step, or these are the tips and tricks to solve them. But during my preparation, I could not even categorize the problems and have like a specific procedure on how to attempt them, even in SC, CR, or RC. So in that sense, I would say that I did not have a strategy in mind. I was just tackling each question on its own and going by gut feeling of what felt right.
But why was this not enough? And again, I'm just trying to figure out. I know we didn't have this in our standard Q&A, but why did not this not trigger a response during the first 10 months before that 720 attempt? Because the
Because
systematic piece was aware. You were aware of this, or
yes,
you must
because
have been, right?
yes, because until then I was scoring pretty well, decent around where I was aiming to be, and I was consoling myself by saying that until now I've taken the harder tests, and the actual GMAT might even be easier. So I would say my weaknesses got exposed during the actual exam, where I could not depend on my gut feeling, because at the 700 level you cannot really go by gut feeling. That's what I felt, and that's when I realized that this approach is totally wrong. I really needed like a systematic way of preparation as well.
Okay, and so you then purchased the e-GMAT course, and then what is one of the first things that you did once you purchased the course?
Even before the course, I was in a hurry to get finished with the exam, so I had booked the next date within 16 days, and then
Mhm.
later I had enrolled in the course. So when my mentor got to know that we have only 16 days, she was very helpful in terms of preparing the plan, the step-by-step
Also,
plan
you
for the
improved in
16.
16 days?
Yeah, in terms of CR, I did. Yeah, I booked the test in 16 days.
Oh,
In,
yeah. Okay, yes. Yeah. Got it.
yeah,
So,
just
okay.
to
So,
get
what was
it
the
done
first
with.
thing that you did?
Yeah, so I booked the date in 16 days, thinking that it would naturally improve. The verbal would just improve. I'll just solve more questions, and that would be it. But then thinking about it, I realized that it was not going to work. And although I had booked a date within 16 days, I should probably take it slow. So when I contacted e-GMAT, they assigned me mentor Aditi, where she was aware of my situation, that I had booked a test so near. So she said, "We'll give it our best shot, but we always have a second chance." So in those 16 days, our first plan based on my ability quizzes was to tackle CR, because internally also I knew that CR was weak. CR was my weakest, because I really went through gut feeling in that. And if you see my ability quizzes, it actually shows a very high score, like 84 or 94 percentile. But I
Mhm.
knew it was a luck factor, because that system was able to detect it
So,
accurately.
the AI said, hey, you got this high score, but don't trust it. You got lucky, and here is data that proves you got lucky here. Okay. All right.
That's
So, you worked on CR post that.
Yes. So our plan for the 16 days was to tackle CR first, because I was leaving points on the table for my RC and SC because of spending a lot of time on CR. So we thought that we would better spend our time on CR. And Quant, I was already at Q49, but still we tried to do a bit of geometry and word problems as well to polish those areas.
Hmm. Okay. So, when you studied CR, and did you go through the entire CR course?
Yes, yes. I went through the entire CR course. Initially, it did feel a bit tough to apply the pre-thinking approach, especially because earlier I was not applying any methodology or a step-by-step procedure. So initially, the pre-thinking approach actually took me quite some time, 2 to 3 minutes per question. But I realized I needed to stick to this, because this would certainly give me results if I followed it. So I started with the easier questions to apply this pre-thinking approach. And
Hmm.
slowly and steadily, I realized in about 4 or 5 days after solving a few questions on using the pre-thinking procedure, that it actually helps us to distinguish the answer which is correct from those which are wrong very clearly. So earlier there used to be this confusion in my mind that even this looks correct, even this looks correct. But now I knew exactly what the incorrect answer was and which was the correct one. So in terms of CR, I did realize that I was now gaining that understanding of how to solve CR questions, and I was able to apply it effectively.
And it did show up as data in your next attempt because even though your ability scores remain very similar, their time went down by about 20 odd seconds on every CR question, right? You went from 2 minutes 18 seconds to a minute 52. That's something. And this also helped you in RC when you try to fix CR.
Right.
Your RC ability also, if I'm looking at data right now over here, it went from that 68 to that 78 percentile in that
Right.
case.
Right. Earlier,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, earlier I was spending like 2 minutes plus per question on CR, but now during my next attempt, each CR question that I was doing, I was using the pre-thinking approach, which kind of helped me distinguish the correct answer from the rest. And without even studying for RC specifically, I was able to gain more time in that, and that's how I got even more comfortable with RC and got more time to solve questions there.
Got it. So your 16-day attempt that you're talking about, your score actually went down. You went from a 720 to a 710. What happened there?
I would say the major cause was SC. If you look at my SC ESR, it went very low because we hadn't actually worked on SC. Our target was on RC with on CR, which actually showed results in terms of the time saved there, which I had applied in RC. So SC was definitely something that I had not worked on, and even my quant improved
Yes.
from Q49 to Q50. But what happened during the exam was I had given my quant first, and then I started seeing really easy questions in the middle of the quant section, and then I thought I'd actually messed it up completely. So with this thought in mind, I went to the verbal section, thinking that I've already messed up quant, so verbal doesn't matter whatever I do. So in that thought process, I even messed up my verbal. And then when I saw the score, I was a bit shocked seeing that Q50 had hit in quant, but in verbal, my score had dipped even lower than my first attempt. So that was like a bit shocking.
Got it. Okay. And this is one of those learnings that I think we've had about, I've done 4 interviews in the last 3 to 4 months where people who've taken multiple attempts have made the same mistake, that they try to judge the test based on the difficulty level of question that they're being served. And it can happen on the test very easily that if the scoring algorithm is already determined that, hey, you are with a very high reliability that you are at this level, it will not waste difficult questions on you.
Right.
Okay.
Actually,
So,
yeah, that's true.
and if you're a stat guy, there's this thing called confidence interval. I don't know if you guys have read about it, but if I'm very confident, saying that I'm 99% confident that this guy's at 90th ability, 90th percentile ability, and there's only one more level beyond that, and I'm also confident he's not at that ability level, and I'm going to just throw random questions, and it happens on the quant section, it happens on the verbal section, on the GMAT. It's just how algorithms work. So don't try and judge the test. Always give your best. And we had a student who actually went to Kellogg, and she wasted one attempt and close to $300 just because of this. Because it's not just the test fees; it's also the ESR that you get after that. That costs money. And so yeah, don't try and judge the test. That's one input that I have, an advice that I give to people. So you got that 710, that Q50 was there, but that verbal score went down in SC. So then how did you go about improving to that V42 while maintaining quant? What was your strategy over there?
So our next strategy was to tackle SC and work a bit on RC as well, as we had not touched these areas before. So for SC, I started with the concept files again, and I went through the meaning-based approach. So earlier, what I used to do was in SC, I used to be able to get the correct answer up to a certain level of questions, say around 650 level. But once those 700 levels questions start coming in, all the answers seem very close and seem very correct. But there's a very slight difference in terms of the meaning, which actually changes the entire answer. And this I only realized after going through the concept files of SC and adopting the meaning based approach. And when I started using them even on the quizzes which I'd taken in the Scholaranium, that's when I realized that for the higher difficulty questions, meaning based approach is the best way to go forward to tackle those questions, because at a 700 plus level, meaning is the main difference rather than grammar rules or any other rules that we have.
So you'd gone through the Manhattan files. You'd done every official question. So in the OG 2021, 22, and the GMAT Advanced. And then you'd gone through. So after spending all of those 10 months, then you'd spend about a month and a half with the GMAT course. So what's the difference in how you approach questions in those first 10 months versus how you approach questions once you went through the SC and CR courses?
So in the first 10 months, as I said, I did not have any proper procedure of approaching questions, be it any section, even quant
So let's
or
take SC. How would you solve an SC question in the first 10
I would
months?
I would read the question, just focus on the underlined part, not pay much attention to the remaining non-underlined portion, which actually makes a big difference, which I realized later on. So I would used to focus on the underlined part, and then go through each answer choice, eliminate those answers based on grammar straight away, and out of the remaining ones, whichever sounded correct, I used to just choose them. Most of
So
the
when
time,
it
they used to.
sounded correct means then you also read the non-underlined part to sound it
Yeah,
completely.
yeah. If it sound that was the deal breaker, the non-underlined part. So earlier I used to just focus on grammar. Once that is ruled out, then read the entire sentence and what makes the most sense, basically. So there was not a very good approach, I would say, compared to the meaning-based approach, which I later realized on how we should exactly
So how did you do
conceptualize.
it then? So what was the approach once you went through the e-GMAT course?
So after the e-GMAT course, how the approach was that to read the sentence very carefully, the entire sentence, not just the underlined portion, and then get a brief summary of what the sentence is actually trying to say. And once that is laid out, that's when you go to the answer choices. And within the answer choices, when you plug in the answer choices, again, it is important to view the entire sentence in its entirety and then choose the one which not only is grammatically correct, but also meaning wise, it conveys the same meaning that the author is trying to imply in his original sentence. So that actually helped me to eliminate answers both on logic as well as grammar. So this
Doesn't
was the
it take a
main.
lot more effort though? I mean, it just sounds like a lot more effort to.
Yeah, initially it did take a lot of time, especially given my earlier approach. I did find it difficult to kind of do this entire procedure. But once you start solving more questions after like a few 15, 20 questions, I think it comes by nature. You don't have to follow this procedure exactly. It comes by nature. It comes automatically. So by the time you're done reading the question, you already know what to expect in terms of the answer and which would make more sense in terms of what the author is trying to convey. So that's how I realized that meaning based approach would be the best way forward.
I think one of the things which is there is on the and that's kind of where once you get the meaning based approach and you start seeing those repetitive sentence structures, you really say, oh, this is, I know what's going to be there in the answer choices, and rejecting answer choices starts to become easier. And that's very similar with CR too. And I think um, with this, there are only so many ways in which the GMAT's going to try and trick you, and that's what pre-thinking does, where you can clearly identify what's correct versus what's incorrect over there. So let's start with Quant, and so what were your pain points that Aditya identified in Quant, and how did you work towards them?
Okay, so in Quant, the pain points were in terms of the data sufficiency questions more than the problem solving. And within that, the categories were geometry and word problems. So there were two data points to support this. One was my ESR, and second was the ability quizzes, which kind of reflected that these were the weaker areas. And to strengthen these, again, the approach was to go through the concept file and not skip any of them, just go through each one systematically and solve those practice questions that follow, and then slowly move on to the quizzes once we have solidified our concepts. So we adopted this procedure, and then when I followed the concept files, actually a lot of my doubts also got cleared because I think there were a few gaps in my understanding, as well as some of the concept that I had not come across earlier, as well as some tips and tricks. So when I adopted this approach in terms of solving the quizzes and the practice questions, it really helped me kind of even lower my timing that I was taking and get the questions right as well.
But you're a Q49 student to begin with. You'd gone through everything that the Manhattan series offered. You'd gone through all the official questions as well. So as you went through the course, wasn't that boring for you? I mean, as someone who's starting as a Q49 student?
No, actually, I like learning anything. I just love exploring new things. Like because even the concept files, some of the areas that I came across were quite new to me. And in terms of studying, I was never kind of demotivated because I was always looking to aim at that Q50, Q51 level. But I was losing out on those points just because of these few weak areas. So I knew that I had to concentrate on these areas to improve my score. And another thing I would say is in data sufficiency, especially, I was not paying full attention to the question. So whenever I was looking at the two choices that were given, A and B, I used to kind of forget about the first statement when I was doing the second one, and vice versa. So I was making a lot of careless mistakes in terms of quant as well, and this could be revealed through my error log. So if you see my error log, all of them are like careless errors, not reading question properly or not marking the correct answer. So this also I realized when I started maintaining an error log as well, that this is what is pulling down my scores. So there was both a combination of missing concepts and not paying full attention to the question being asked.
So do you go through the quant basics course in the DS module there?
Yes, I started from the quant basics. I did not want to miss out anything this time. So I went through the quant basics. Then step by step, Aditi had laid out the plan in terms of geometry and word problems as well. So in that also, I took the concept files and did all the practice quizzes, ensuring that I do not skip anything, just to be sure. Yeah.
Okay. Now, coming back to quant itself, I mean, so you talked about the error log. So tell us about, more about it. Did you have it during your first attempt? Or I mean, how did you and then how did it help you during your second attempt? What insights did it give you, and how did you go about creating one?
So I never had maintained an error log before, up to 7 or 8 months up to my first attempt. And that's why I was thinking I was not able to kind of narrow down on my weak areas, because an error log is something very important, which I neglected up until the first attempt. So I was just haphazardly solving questions from everywhere and not knowing what exactly to focus on. Then when I joined e-GMAT, they have this specific emphasis on maintaining an error log. And my mentor also said that it's always important to maintain an error log. Initially, I thought, okay, what extra insight would this provide? I already know that I'm weak in this. I might be weak in this. I'll just solve more questions and that would be it. But error log is not something just for the purpose of having it there. I think the way we even write down our error log is very important in terms of categorizing in the different types of questions and the types of mistakes that we make. So when I started maintaining an
Can
error
you give
log,
an example just to that types of questions, types of mistakes? In SC, for example, what would you enter in your error log, or CR, or word problems? What would you enter?
for example, in SC, there are a number of subtypes of the mistakes that you can make. For me, the most common one was the very last point where you know exactly what the question is trying to ask, but the meaning goes wrong. So you have not applied the meaning-based approach. So in my error log, all the choices or all the columns are filled with did not apply a meaning-based approach or did not pay attention to the meaning.
So in this case, what you're saying is you'd select an answer choice that seemed grammatically correct, but did not communicate the meaning that the author wanted to communicate. So you didn't bring the meaning along with you.
Correct. I was not trying to fill in that answer choice in the overall sentence structure and kind of tie back to what the author had originally said. So that was a clear pattern that was emerging in my error logs in SC as well.
Okay. What about CR? What did it have in CR?
CR was not applying the pre-thinking approach. So that was the initial part when I just started off. I used to just jump into questions, but after that, the pattern that emerged was not able to identify the gap in the author's reasoning. That was more common. Then when I tried to improve that, the subsequent sections of the error log started to show up, like I would say getting confused between two very similar choices.
So those words would show up that you weren't able to identify how just that one word is in that answer choice changed the entire visualization of what that answer choice meant. Got it.
Yes.
And this is something which I think is a maturity progression. Your error logs are a really great way to look at how much you've progressed with that level of building that ability. And I think when you see that transition from saying, hey, I didn't do pre-thinking, to not being able to identify the logical gap, to really saying, hey, I've gotten to the point where, I'm getting most questions right. I think that part's really important, because some people will still stay confused with two answer choices and get most questions wrong, but that's not who you were. You got most questions right, but then those very few questions, there were these two answer choices that still confused you. And you say, okay, there's a difference in these words, and this is where this is where the learning is, and this is what I'm going to do to not make the same mistake again. Now that's kind of, and I think it's really important to also put in two more contextual data points here. So the time of revising per question in those first 10 months versus let's kind of look at the last 2 weeks before your test. How much more time were you spending on revising your mistakes in the 2 weeks before your test versus in that first attempt?
So during my up until my first attempt, my only aim was to do more and more questions. So the aim was really never to deeply understand the solutions. I used to only look at the solutions for the questions that I'd got wrong and not the ones that I got correct. But this is usually what causes the most mistakes, because sometimes what happens is the questions that we get correct are not driven or gotten through the correct procedure that we are supposed to use. Sometimes it's just luck, or sometimes we do not actually understand what led to that answer. So I think up until my first attempt, I was just focusing on the wrong questions, the ones that I got wrong, and even the solution I was not actually paying much attention to. I was just trying to kind of relate to it, but then I was not applying it to the future questions with the similar type. But after joining e-GMAT, I would say I was spending, I think, twice or thrice the time on my solutions than my questions, because this time my goal was to kind of identify the patterns or the type of solutions that can guide the questions. So this time I was definitely spending a lot of time on the solutions and trying to kind of take that in the back of my mind moving forward, that this solution can apply to this kind of questions.
Yeah, I mean, V42 is 96 percentile. That's almost achieving perfection. One of the things that's there from this is when it comes to achieving perfection, it's about doing things differently. And just another data point that I wanted to add is during those, last 20-25 days, how many questions did you solve before that 750 attempt?
Very few. I think I was just revising my error logs and taking a few cementing or not ability, cementing quizzes mostly, but very few questions. I was just revising the ones that I had got wrong, especially, and going through my error log, because doing that, I think, kind of reminded me of where I go wrong usually, which ultimately helped me on my 750 attempt. Because solving new questions without realizing where you have gone wrong in the past, I feel, is the wrong way to approach any kind of an exam as well. So I was, very few questions, I would say, in the final stages of the third attempt.
You also took Sigma X mocks, right? How was your experience with taking the Sigma X mocks compared to taking really the official mocks or the Manhattan mocks? And then what did they tell you?
To be honest, both the times I gave my GMAT exam, one day before I'd given the Sigma X mock, and both of them were exactly the same breakdown and the same score that I'd got on the actual exam. So I would say, in terms of the type of questions and the quality of the questions, it's similar or exactly the same as
So
GMAT.
you the 710 attempt before that Sigma X said you're going to get a 710, Q50
Yes,
V36, and then 750, Q50 V42, and then you got that on the actual test as well. Okay.
same. Yes, exactly. And in between, I did give a few other Sigma mocks. And if you see the trend, it was like a downward parabola. I went from 710 to 690. 690 was my lowest point, where I thought I would almost give up, that this is not going to happen. I'm not ever going to reach that 750 score. But then I tried to pick myself up again, and then I hit that 750 score right before my exam, one day before my exam. And then I was confident, okay, now I've reached my peak and I'm ready to go for the next attempt.
So when you got that 690, what did Aditi say?
Aditi never stopped believing me, to be honest. She was very motivating. When I told her that this is my score, 690, so she said, definitely this is not what you are as a person. I know you. You have been solving all these questions diligently. And when I realized, I did the solutions of my 690, when I looked at the solutions at my 690 attempt, I realized I had made a lot of careless mistakes. It was not the concepts that I was getting wrong, but not I was not at all paying attention to the questions. I was just rushing through the entire question paper, and making very careless mistakes, like choosing the wrong option or forgetting what the question is trying to ask. So if you see my solution error log for 690 attempt, it's full of these careless mistakes. So we knew that 690 is definitely not where I stand at currently. And thanks to Aditi's support, that I did not back off that time.
I think one of the things which we really just say, mock is one data point, and for us, when it comes to this, the consistent performance and in test readiness quizzes is something which is very important, and those tell who you are as a person. When I say mocks a data point, in fact, even your GMAT attempt is a data point. It's an outcome of all of those data points that you've been building, and when you look at a person's ability, it is that amalgam of that those data points, which kind of goes to that question that Pranay is asking: how can you get a mentor yourself? um, you know um, y- we have this saying at e-GMAT: if you show us that you're diligent, and if you show us that you can improve to a point by yourself, which by the way is a show of diligence, we will get you a mentor. But till then we won't, because essentially our mentors want to make sure that if we give you something, some inputs, you actually work towards them. We don't charge you for mentors, but we want to make sure that you're diligent, and then you would work with. In fact, which is where about even people who show diligence, when we give them a mentor, we actually make them sign a contract, really say you're going to do these things as we say. That's why we're offering this service free of charge. And when they don't deliver on that, we really just say sorry, we can't work with you, and that's very, very clear. I mean, for us, um, we are building this community to essentially enable people to go beyond what they think they can do, and push the boundaries, and we can only do so much at our end to push those boundaries. It's the inputs need to come from you. I mean, here Shubham was the one who revised this, uh, his concepts really well, or questions really well, once he made the mistake. Shubham was the one who did not give up. Yes, we believed in him, but he was the one who did not give up. Um, and and one of the reasons why we conduct such interviews is to demonstrate the qualities that a 750 scorer has. 750 is 98 percentile. I mean, you're among the top 2 percentile of students worldwide. And I can tell you, most 99.5 percentile students would struggle to score a 750 on the 99.5 percentile students on the CAT would struggle to score a 750 on the GMAT. A very different ball game, very different set of qualities that you need, and you demonstrate those to us, and we will help you push the barriers that you think are there for you. So let me ask this. I think this is the last question, and then we'll take questions from folks there. Um, what's the difference between a 700 student and a 750 student, in your opinion, Shubham?
I think comparing my two selves, one before the 720 and one before the 750, the major difference I would say is in terms of how you approach questions. So a 700 student would be able to go by his gut feeling up to a certain level, up to a 650 or maybe 700 level questions. But after that, it would be very challenging to solve those very high difficulty questions without having any systematic approach to fall back to. But a 750 student would not only be careful of how to approach questions, he would have all the strategies required in terms of each question type, how to approach them, and not make even the silliest of errors, and not lose points to that, because silly errors can actually cost a lot in GMAT. That's what I've learned through the hard way. Yeah.
Oh, anywhere. I mean, it's not just the GMAT, any test. In fact, think about it this way. I mean, you could actually take the question and I'll say, what's the difference between a businessman who's reasonably successful but hasn't done an MBA versus a successful businessman who's done an MBA? And if I were to answer this question, is I would say that it's the frameworks that you get during an MBA that help you make those decisions, taking those decisions more decisive or so. So I think that's the same piece with taking the GMAT. I mean, yes, if you're a smart guy, you'll be able to get to a certain level and solve those questions properly. But it'll take you a lot longer. It took you 10 months to get to that, and you will reach a point where you would get to a plateau, unless you're a super smart student or so. Then of course, I mean, there are people who get to a 760 without any help. Um, but then you would reach that threshold, and you would continue to put in the effort without seeing the results, and solve those thousands and thousands of questions or so. Okay. Now, that was a great answer, Shubham. Okay, so with that, I think of all the questions that I had, we good answers to. Just one question: which schools will you be aiming for? Have you thought about that? I know it's a few years out.
Definitely the M7 for sure, firstly, and then a few backup options also. I want to not have all the eggs in one basket, so I would definitely spread out the options. But I'm looking to move towards consulting, so definitely would look to target some of the top schools where I could pursue a career in consulting after MBA over there. So I'm yet to start detailed research, but I'll do that soon once we get closer to the actual admission date.
Okay. So let's take a few questions. How much time did you spend using e-GMAT to make that improvement? So you can give the actual time you spend, and I'm going to add some context to that.
Okay, assuming we are counting in the 710 attempt as well, it
We
took
should, we
me,
should.
yeah, it took me around 2 months along with the 710 attempt. And yeah, so that was 2 months from the 720 to 750. But you can say that the initial 16 days was just to kind of familiarize myself with the different concepts in CR, and then moving on to the other sections. So in effect, if I would say, I could have achieved this within 1.5 months if I had not rushed for that 16 days attempt that I'd taken in middle.
And I think you should also add some context to how many hours would you put in a day. So I think that's kind of the definition of a day.
So I was working full time during this period as well, although I changed my jobs in between. So my newer job is allowing me a bit more time. So on weekdays I used to spend 1 hour, not much, but on weekends used to be around 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. Because moving from 720 to 750 is not like you have to put in a lot of hours. It's just more of clearing the concepts and polishing exactly where you need after you identify the weaknesses. So that did not take like 8 or 10 hours in on the weekends, or a lot of hours, I would say. It was more of the polishing bit, which could be done in much lesser time.
Yeah, I think the two answers to this question. One is who you for someone like Shubham who actually had who's a bright guy and but it didn't have a proper approach to solving questions. And for him, the reason it took about 80 to 90 hours of effort, which is what it sounds it would in the end, was because he had to learn those approaches to begin with. And so I think that's where a lot of that effort was spent in. Now, if you're an EG matter and you're at 720, that time required is probably 15 days for you, or it's about 40 hours of effort for you to get there because you don't have to learn those approaches. The very fact that you're at a 720 means that you know the approaches well, you're applying them. You just need to focus more on building those error logs and finding out those specific weaknesses out there. And so depending on who you are, the answer in this the time required could vary, and that's I think really important. Now, can you enroll just for verbal on GMAT on e-GMAT? We used to have a verbal course. It used to be $249, and one thing that we recognized was that hey, everyone who really says they need verbal, even Q51 students, still need to revise Quant A, and B they still need the Sigma X mocks, and C they still needed the entire Scholaranium with all the features in there. So we had the 2 month course, which is for GMAT Online Focus, where you get both quant and verbal. That way, you can ask us any question. We don't have to worry about are you a quant student, are you a verbal student, should we not answer a certain question or so. And one of the things which you would not suffer, which I think is your example, Shubham, is a great one, is to really say, hey, if you're focusing on just one thing, in your case, the reason you primarily suffered during that 17 attempt was SC, and you didn't focus on it as much. So we don't want you to not focus on either quant or verbal. That way you have access to everything that you want to study for. And you save money, by the way. It's a cheaper course. So let's look at this. I think we talked about how can you get a mentor. Let's look at this one over here. I've already spent 3 mock tests, have only 2 left. Are you going to make more? No, we're not making more mocks. You should need more mocks. I mean, there's just so much stuff in Scholaranium. Make sure you go through cementing quizzes or so. But Shubham, yeah.
Yeah, I think the mock. So I would say I don't make the mistake of just taking a lot of mocks, which I earlier did. It doesn't really help unless you have cemented those concepts. Mock test is just to kind of test your stamina and endurance during the actual test conditions. It's not to judge where you are currently, because the actual cementing quizzes and all should be taken earlier than the mock test. And Scholaranium already has a lot of questions in their bank, and I see questions being added daily as well. So I never ran out of questions. So there's a huge pool of questions. You can first do the quizzes and cementing, and then move on to the mock test. Do not just waste all the
Yeah,
mock
I
test.
think one of the big things which a lot of people really say is, let me see where my GMAT score is. Wrong question. If you're studying SC, you should say, let me see how much I've improved in SC. That's why the cementing and ability quizzes help you. And if you've done well over there, you don't need to validate with the mocks. Please don't do that. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. If you've done cementing in SC, move to CR. Do cementing in CR, then move to RC, and don't use the mock. Is what I would say. They are for their test readiness stage, not your learning stage, and that's one really important quality that also a successful student needs to have to really say, trust the process, and trust the gut feel that you're getting, rather than getting pure external validation. And that's very, very important in my opinion. Here's a really good question, which is from Raman, and I think this is a question for you.
I've realized GMAT, especially Quant, is a sharpness game more than necessarily being a test to check
Who
who
can do
can
the
do.
fastest and best? What was that an epiphany that you had?
Uh, yeah, I would say I thought Quant, I would naturally be able to do well in Quant because I had done well in Quant earlier in university and school days. But I think GMAT Quant is still a different ballgame altogether. It does not just test your math calculation
It's not
skills.
GMAT math. It's GMAT quant.
Yeah, it's not anything to do with your your fastest and best math skill or mental maths. I think it's more of reasoning, right? It's quantitative reasoning.
It's
It's more of
reasoning.
your
It's reasoning.
logical. Yes, in real life scenarios too, I don't think we would be asked to multiply or add or subtract numbers. It would be more of making sense of when you're presented with data to make logic and reasoning out of it. So that's what the GMAT quant is also trying to achieve. It's trying to give us questions where we have to take a more logical approach than doing anything mentally. I mean, that's why they don't even have calculators there. We are not expected to solve anything mentally or using a calculator, because in real life also we have softwares to do that. There's more of applying logic and reasoning. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would say, as an MBA, it's much more about visualizing information, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, and really think, does this make sense? Okay, and it's very interesting. So, someone I have a Q51 score, but that was 18 years ago. I haven't formally studied quant in just, I would say, in the last 10 years or so. I've not done any of it now, but I still get questions where within the GMAT uh, 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 team, people create questions, and they'll say, hey, the fun question that I created, can you send that to me? In fact, there's a fun question on our YouTube channel in the community poll on probability that you should attend. Fabulous question on soccer and Ronaldo and his the likelihood of joint probability of his team winning and Ronaldo scoring 3 goals. And that's a question that I look at it, and I don't do the math, but I can actually really figure out what the answer would be just by visualizing through information and saying these don't make sense. This should, especially in data sufficiency. A lot of people are really like, how do you know this is the answer? And I usually get answers faster than they do, just because things don't make sense. I kind of funnelize things through this. Now I don't formally solve them, and if you were to ask me to formally solve them, half the time I would fumble through them because I haven't done it for 8 years. I can do a lot of verbal because that's something that I've formally done it, but not quant. But that's just the GMAT. GMAT quant is not about math. It's a lot about logic. If you approach things logically, you're going to find it's actually fairly simple. And it's also fairly complex in the sense that you have to really have those inference skills, you have to have those visualization skills, you have to make sure that you consider all cases in that way. It's about diligence than pure math. Okay. Um, let's look at this. Doubt clearing. It wasn't one-on-one for you, right? This was something that, I mean, did you have a lot of doubts when you're going through content that weren't already answered?
No, not really. Actually, all the content there, even the quizzes and the Scholaranium questions, have a really nice pool of expert answers. Where even if you do have a question, you can directly post it there, and it's replied or answered to within minutes. So I did not really feel the need of having a one-on-one doubt clearing. Yes, I did approach Aditi if I had any doubts relating on what I should do next, or is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this the correct way? But not nothing uh, to a particular question, because again we have all those expert responses and which are pretty detailed and pretty clear. So yeah.
I think this is a question you've answered, but let's do this and then one last one. I think that's pretty much all the questions that we have. Yeah. So how close were the mocks to the real one?
As I said, they were the exact replica of the ones that I had on my actual exam. Even the trends kind of gave me an idea of where I was heading towards. And uh, the type of questions and the quality of questions, I would say, were very similar in terms of even verbal and quant both, and across all the sections as well, SC, RC, and CR, wherein actually found that the verbal section and even the quant section challenged us to think much more logically at the 700 plus level once we reached there. And I think that also helped me quite a bit on my actual exam. When I actually faced those questions, I was able to kind of recollect what I had gone through during my Sigma mocks and answer those correctly, and using the pre-taught strategies that I had now in my arsenal.
Okay, and I think this is probably a follow-up to that. So after taking a mock test, what did you do? I think it's a really important question for a lot of people here.
I think after taking the mock test, the very first thing you need to do is spend at least some time analyzing the solutions. I think that's the most important step there. You should spend more time on the solutions than giving the actual mock exam, because solutions are the ones where you realize where you have gone wrong and where you could have done better. I also tried to maintain an error log for my all my mocks, and I could see all the patterns that were existing throughout my error logs. And also do keep some space or some distance between the mocks. Do not make the mistake that I did of consecutively giving 5 or 6 mocks altogether, which doesn't do anything than just taxing you out or demoralizing you. So yeah, my major takeaway would be to analyze each and every solution from the mock exam.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that you have to really understand is why you're taking the mock test. So, I mean, it's a fabulous answer that you gave. I'm going to add some more context to it. So, the first thing you have to really just say, even before you go into the mock, is you have to ask yourself, hey, what have I done in the past? What am I absolutely validating this for, and what is it that I'm not going to be as concerned about if I don't hit? So when I take a mock, before going into it, I want to make sure that I have an idea of what ability scores am I aiming for on quant and verbal. Within quant and verbal, what are the ability scores? And then and let's take an example. Let's say you've been studying for CR and RC, so you want to absolutely make sure you're very close to that target ability if that's what your scholar name starts show you. Now, if you've not been studying for SC, you may be 15 points off your ability score or where you were some points away. And so I think that's kind of the expectation that you're going into the mock with. And the reason why setting that expectation is really important is because you don't want to rush through those CR and RC sections in questions in the mock, because otherwise they'll give you the wrong indication about your preparation. That's one piece, which is preparation going into the mock. The second thing is, what do you do after the mock, and which is where what Shubham has said is absolutely important. I mean, if you spend 3 hours taking the mock, or 2.5 hours taking the mock test, then spend about 3 to 4 hours building that error log, analyzing the answers, not just for correct questions, but also for not just for incorrect questions, but also for questions that you answered incorrectly. And and yes, Ravan, you should spend more time analyzing it, because it is something which is that's kind of where the improvement comes from, frankly. Mocks a score, then you have to ask yourself, how am I going to improve upon it, and doing that error log and looking at those ability scores that you got is how you define that improvement plan. Okay. So, Pranay's question, this is for you.
Hi, Pranay. Thanks for your question. I would say maintain an error log for each and every question that you do. Do not limit yourself only to mocks, because the questions you are solving, even during cementing quiz, are from the same question bank or are of the same type which you would get on the mocks. So you do not want to be in a situation where you have ignored all these questions not on the mocks, and then end up making the same mistakes even during the mocks itself. So do maintain an error log and categorize each question. I repeat, each question that you do, so that you do not have to spend 7 months like I did and not figuring out what to do ahead. Because that error log is an additional weapon that you have in your arsenal as well, to guide you on where you should approach next, or what is the next strategy you need to do.
Yeah, so think about the courses and the questions as like what I call as the armor that you're putting on the body, and as well as the weapons that you're going to use to fight. The error log is pointing out those chinks in the armor, and that's what it just makes sure that it does that fine tuning. Now, Shubham, one thing that you're not aware because of the timeline is that when you did this, you were actually using the error logs, which have now been productionized. So they were at that time you got the error log templates. Those templates actually have gone through two more generations in the last 2 months or so. In the end of and now at the end of every course we have a strategic review module. So it's a complete module that we really in which we show, okay, this is how you go about building an error log. There are way more examples than were given to you now, and so overall students are way better prepared than you were because this is an enhancement that we saw. And this is something where if you've been following our reviews on GMAT Club, you'd really see that the frequency of success has gone up, and people are getting higher scores. And this is, as I said, because you kind of addresses those chinks in the armor, and that's where error logs are very, very useful. We actually call them strategic review now. So because typically what people put in an error log is, I solved an essay question, I did not identify this modifier error or so. Our error logs are not that. They're much more behavioral error logs, so or strategic review processes. The other thing is it is painful. I will tell you that it's not an easy thing to build an error log. You will, for the first 10 to 15 questions in every subsection, you will find it, and you will be frustrated to really say, why the hell am I going through this process? I should be smiling. Were you that happened with you? You were frustrated?
Yeah, that's the very first reason I did not maintain an error log. I was thinking that what's the point of doing this? You're just basically trying to figure out where you went wrong, but you have already seen the solution, so you already know that. But the point of an error log is to kind of have a history with you, so that you can understand the trend. It's more of a trend and data analytics than anything else. And also so that you can build upon those errors that you have done in past and rectify them in the future. Because if you don't maintain an error log, you do not know where you have gone wrong in the past, and you cannot identify the trends. Because I realized I was making the same mistakes over and over again, because those actually showed up in my error log multiple
The
instances.
word is you realized, and that is a very powerful term because without that realization, that improvement is not going to happen. And
Right.
and it's so an error log is not just to document where you went wrong. It's also to actually hit yourself to really say, why the hell did I make the same mistake again? And before the mock test, you really say, these are the mistakes that I'm making. I've got to be careful not to do these things because these habits lead to mistakes for me. And those habits would be different for every individual in every subsection. So that's why you need to go through that effort of creating that error log.
I would also like to add one thing here, that it is also important that you revise your error logs regularly, because what happens is sometimes you just keep filling up your error logs and then you realize you have been making the same mistakes again. This is mainly because you're not revising them. If you revise the error logs, you can quickly find out that this is what I need to fix, and then in next time you do not make the same mistake again.
Great point. I absolutely agree with that. All right, Shubham. With that, I want to thank you for joining us today. It was wonderful having you. If you guys love this, then absolutely, press the like button. Let us know. And I want to thank all of you who joined us for your questions. Again, we have two upcoming webinars. We have a CR webinar, which is this weekend. That's on Saturday. I'll be hosting that webinar, and then we also have a number properties webinar. The CR webinar will teach the pre-thinking approach. So we're going to start from the very basics, but solve some of the most challenging questions there. and we'll teach you how to apply that approach. Number properties, if we're going to focus just on one topic, that is remainders on the GMAT. Again, go from really the very, very foundation to talking about negative and positive remainders to solving some really challenging data sufficiency questions. So I hope to see you guys. And then Shubham, thank you once again for taking the time out, and good luck for those applications in a few years.
Thank you, Rajat, and thank you everyone who joined today.